Well, for most apparel companies, about 40% of their product is based on cotton. And so I think most people don't think they have a lot of risks, but in the next 10 years, we're going to see increasing scarcity of water in key cotton production areas, so China, India, Pakistan, Turkey, other places that grow a lot of cotton. We're also going to see an increasing concern about greenhouse gas emissions and how much energy is used to actually produce cotton and then move it all around the world to make products. Those two factors alone are going to radically change what kind of cotton is available, where it's available, and how it gets moved around. And that's a risk that I think most companies today aren't thinking about. The interesting thing is that there are some countries like Uzbekistan where the future is now. Cotton is a very water-intensive crop, uses about 3% of the world's freshwater resources. Many instances, like what you see in Uzbekistan, is most of that water is actually lost before it even gets to the field. And in Uzbekistan, the Aral Sea, which used to be one of the world's largest freshwater resources, is now only 15% of its original size. And that's because of the dramatic overpumping of water for irrigation for cotton. The first thing I think is actually to have a strategy on commodities like cotton and involve your suppliers. A lot of times brands throw up their hands because they say, you know, I use a lot of this material, but I don't buy it. I don't know where it comes from. And it's very easy to find out where those products come from and then to work with your suppliers to manage them. And we're seeing a lot of brands take proactive steps to work with suppliers to actually look at the materials they're using, decide what they really want in that material mix, and then get it into the product. That's a trend that we think is going to continue over the next several years. The other things that we're seeing in supply chain management, which is interesting, is brands are focused on sustainability, whether they have enough energy available to them, and whether it's clean and not producing greenhouse gas emissions, or water available to them. And they're starting to see that that may be a concern or issue for their supply partners. And so we're starting to see some very interesting collaborations around energy management, water management, chemical management. And it's not just at the manufacturing stage, it goes all the way down to the farming level. There are many benefits, short-term and long-term, for transparency. In the short term, the things that most companies report seeing first is just gains in efficiency. With more transparency, you know who's in your chain and you can plan better, communicate better, and most importantly, problem solve better. So what happens is you know what's happening, and instead of a little problem becoming a big problem and costing lots of time and energy and resources, you nip problems in the bud. And that means you've got shorter lead times, you've got product in market when you want it in market, and you ideally are able to manage your quality in a much better way. In the long term, the very interesting thing about transparency is that companies and their partners can actually work together. And we're starting to see really interesting cases of innovation in product design, in being able to develop new products, differentiate those products, and get them to market in different ways by chains that are working in a transparent way. Most companies don't think that they have social risk from cotton, but in fact it's actually quite significant. Most of the cotton that's used in the globe today is hybridized cottonseed, so that's cotton that has to be bred by hand. In many countries like India, the hybridization of cottonseed is done often by children. In addition, there are many, many countries which use child labor or forced labor or slave labor to actually plant, grow, and harvest the cotton. So again, Uzbekistan is a country which has a dramatic problem with the use of forced child labor in cotton production. In addition, once that cotton goes from moving from the field into the gin to be processed, there are some very significant issues with health and safety for workers in gins. In many places, gin workers are not wearing shoes. They often have hand injuries. There are lots of problems with hearing loss in gins, and that's because they're not very safe places to work in many instances, and they're often unseen and unregulated. The first thing is, I think you need to know where your cotton comes from. And so we really encourage every brand to decide to find out the country of origin of the cotton that it uses. Secondly, you should learn more about the kinds of labor practices that are found in those countries. And there are great groups, Human Rights Watch and others, that can help you understand a bit more about what's happening on the ground. Lastly, we really encourage you to engage your suppliers and have their suppliers talk to their suppliers. So for example, cotton merchants and traders play a huge role in buying and selling cotton all over the world. we really encourage brands to find out not only where the cotton comes from, but who in the supply chain moves and handles that, and encourage those merchants and business partners to use cotton that's produced in an environmentally and socially responsible way.
So do boycotts or bans of a commodity really work?
They absolutely do. What's interesting is once you ask the question, where does cotton come from, and you can trace the origin of it, you can really start to place pressure on governments or other actors to change their practices on the ground. And it's when people feel the economic pinch, when the message comes from the brand down to its business partners and then down to the actual buying and selling of the cotton, that it makes a difference. And in the case of Uzbekistan, we're starting to see really significant changes happen there. Cotton is one of the fundamental commodities that's grown around the world that helps start the economic development cycle in countries. You grow cotton and then you start to process the cotton and then you make textiles, and trade begins to emerge from there. In countries like Uzbekistan, which have difficult social circumstances underlying their cotton production, they need to have a positive future. And brands and their partners can really help bring attention to the need for a positive situation and positive economic development in countries like Uzbekistan, and then help encourage resources to be invested in that country in a way that brings that more sustainable development.